Hello, Savage Flight Crew. So we're entering into that next zone of athlete, in this case, another emerging elite who was either just took off of college or is there. That had the pleasure to work with and experience through Savage Flight. In this case, we're talking about Julia de Gratola Aere. And Julia, one of the hardest workers. Um, believe Coach Walker said that, her high school coach and her provincial club coach. In this case, Julia is one hell of a worker and one of the most mission-driven athletes I had the pleasure to work with. So remember, young coaches or rising coaches, philosophically, keep in your system some tenets so you keep your sanity. Remember, my case, I have the idea that I keep as a framework for my coaching. And in that case, I stands for you initiate potential client relationship. You may evaluate and assess in that under that initiation. Next one, the D. So remember, it's IDEA. What are your ideas? Okay. D, develop. You focus in on developing that skill set and making sure you are believing and focused in on getting better 1% a day in 5 to 7 areas. Could be the mental, could be the physical, could be holistically, but push to get better 1% a day. The E, that's elevate. So now it's time to really elevate the mind, the body, the spirit, and also know how to handle high performance meets, events, and stress. You have to know how to do that. And then the A, that may be someone you acquire. In this case, I'm going to reach out and give thanks to Coach Cody. Coach Cody owns a facility down in Boca and and Allie, a dynamic duo who initially they inherited Julia from the high-end world of gymnastics. And I love that because both Preston, who I spoke of earlier, and Julia are former gymnasts. And all the injuries and all the falls and all the jumps and all the sweat and all the long days, even track compared to gymnastics is shorter than gymnastics. I was always amazed. You get a gymnast, it's 4 to 6 hours. That's that's a hump. So Julia did the conversion, and she wanted to seek out uh, whether she had the ability to handle track as her next goal and move from the world, transition from the world of gymnastics. So Cody actually started the process. You could see where the refinement, because I always notice with both Cody and Allie, they had great pronation. And you could see where Julia came in with great pronation. I think some of it was naturally in her competing, but I think definitely Cody refined it. So my job was to evaluate and assess and determine, is that something she could transition to? So clients will come to me for that. I said, yes, I think this is she's going to be a special talent. Talk to the fam. And we said, let's get at it. And the beauty was she was off the grid. It's so Cody concurred graciously, and in some cases, I'd send her back to Cody for potentiation, contrast training work at his facility. So we moved on, and so essentially for the next 2.5 years, we said let's go ahead and refine. So what did we do that first year? Since she was off the grid, we said okay, let's focus on long sprinting. I thought she could be a very good long sprinter, which she did a great job. She ended up in top six on the club side. We just did unattached, and she did uh, quite well. The one, the two, and the four. very strong, very strong. Could bench 180 pounds. That'll give you an idea. So she's a killer with the throws. So in any event, we move forward and then we have a discussion. He says, hey, because the gymnast family came, Daniela Louise, and Julia said, hey, what do you feel about multi? I said, you know what? That's not a bad idea, either multi or hurdles. And so, since she already had developed that gymnast attitude and mindset, that she had no problem doing multiple events and having her attentions multitasking and spreading out over multiple events, we took on multi. So, with that, the development, as we are saying, coaches, of hurdles, she already knew how to sprint. So now we said, look, as coaches know, if you can't sprint, the hurdles aren't going to go too far. Coaches in college want someone who's fast, and then they can teach the hurdles. Um, it's different. In other words, you'd rather have a great sprinter who can hurdle versus a great hurdler who can't sprint. What do you do? So in any event, so Julia learned the throws, the high jump, and we worked on that, and she gravitated well towards it because she had that mindset, and she's a very, very gifted athlete. So what do we do next? We say, okay, just test it out and elevate, and that's what you see some of the things there as far as the major outings in Alabama or Boston, etc. So she honed her performing skills. And with that being said, then we said, well, what do you think about future? Well, he said, let's even now that you know how to hurdle, you might as well even minimize the pool that you have to address, become a threat as a hurdler that can win. So we elevated to that. And then at that stage, you got to balance distance, schools, coaches, and you either got the same philosophies or you don't, or what's the transition. So in that case, Julia transitioned with Coach Walker and her school. And pretty much I was done, communicated. But one of the greatest things I love about it, yeah, we can still talk. And more importantly, I get great gifts. Because let's talk about Julia at the next level. You see me with the Brazilian hat, and Julia's from Brazil originally. So she was able to go win. Oh no, I'm sorry, take uh, vice champion, which basically is second in the South American championships. So you're going to hear about Julia, uh, U.S., Wake Forest, or South America. But, yeah, in the respect to Brazil. So she's off to Wake Forest. Uh, like I said, Julia is special, just like Preston, and she will. You'll hear she'll make some noise in these next few years. So keep your eye on the ACC and Wake Forest as Julia elevates even further. Because, like I said, what happened next? Because I want to make sure I say it. Now you had to. She then elevated even more with Coach Walker in that environment. And now she's expanding the team as well. And I want to make sure I thank Coach Shade, who elevated in the world of high jump, who was an 8-time All-American, great coach, and Coach Jan Piker, who was a killer at University of Maryland in the throws. So it takes a village. I still say it. It's just you gotta make sure you keep in mind the athlete. All right. So next up, you'll see Julia, Wake Forest. Take care now. Bye bye.